So globally, there are a trichotomy of three key systemic challenges within water resource management, and that includes drinking water contamination, sewage pollution, and water scarcity. Next slide, please. Within low-income urban infrastructure specifically, drinking water contamination has been caused by an increase of divestment in many public infrastructures, as well as, in some cases, underdevelopment. And this has led to the proliferation of contaminants including lead, copper, PFAS, forever chemicals, and microplastics, which not only have an impact on human health, but also affect the health of aquatic wildlife as well. And at the same time, an increasing rate of wastewater pollution is also being generated by divestment in wastewater infrastructure. And globally, wastewater pollution makes up 80% of all untreated contaminants within ocean and open waterways. Next slide, please. So to combat these systemic challenges within water resource management, including, again, drinking water contamination, sewage pollution, and water scarcity, we're developing a compact wastewater treatment system that can be retrofitted into buildings to recycle residential gray water to drinking water. And our system operates by a staggered process of three key water treatment methods, which include bed media filtration, membrane filtration, and UV irradiation to remove all range of contaminants from chemicals and bacteria to pathogens, viruses, and microplastics. Our technology not only increases access to clean drinking water at the tap, but it also reduces the impacts of untreated gray water and water scarcity on local environments. And it does so by scaling a technology which has been tremendously under-neglected in the market, which is gray water reuse. And the reason gray water reuse is underutilized is because it's currently way too expensive to retrofit into existing buildings, because all current market technologies require replumbing the entire building, which can cost up to tens of thousands of dollars to install. So by developing a compact unit that can be retrofitted under sinks, showers, and laundry units to connect drain pipes and supply lines to facilitate potable water reuse without removing any walls or flooring, we can tremendously reduce the installation cost of these processes and these technologies to be able to scale to reach the total addressable market. So we're currently working with UNICEF to begin piloting our technology with their country offices in 2024. And while I do have to leave right now, unfortunately, please connect with me on LinkedIn or follow up with Louisa for my contact information, because I really would love to connect with all of you and learn more about your backgrounds and see if there's ways that we can collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. And yes, if you'd like to connect with Naomi, please reach out to somebody on the pavilion or put a question in the chat, because we'll see that shortly. So thank you very much for that really interesting presentation. Again, you know, taking grey water, purification, the kind of circular economy piece. So that's a theme that's has been relevant for today. So next up for 3 minutes is Dr. Nadad Mukherjee from Floating Homes, C3ER. So welcome. The floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Like many of us, water also has two faces. On the good side, it is one of the, next slide please. Like on the good side, it is one of the most valuable and lifelong resources to sustain human lives on this earth. It also has an ugly face, which is the disaster phase. More than 2/3 of all the disasters are water related, either hydrological, meteorological, or climatological, that displace millions of families out of their homes every year. Next slide, please. To address that, we have designed a home that minimizes the exposure to water-related disasters. It floats when it is flood. It stands still against a storm. It can absorb the shock of a large earthquake, and it is also fireproof. So when sea level rise happens, it gains strength when exposed to salinity due to sea level rise. The home also utilizes the power of water as a resources, the good phase. It harnesses water from rain and uses natural filtration technique to produce 100% safe drinking water. It produces food utilizing 10 times less water than conventional agriculture. We saw that evidence earlier this morning. It offers, and the home is powered by 100% natural renewable resources. So it offers a sustainable livelihood that is climate smart and helps graduating families out of their poverty. We found if a household remains safe from disaster, it self-produces adequate and nutritious food, drink safe water, and use renewables to power their home, then 13 out of 17 sustainable development goals are met, which the home offers. More than 1 billion doesn't have a home today. Our climate resilient home is just available in $6,500 to offer a 6-room duplex villa, net zero, and that comes only a fraction of a conventional cost of a house. The home is made of a brick. My colleague is showing the brick here that we have been researching for the last 7 years. It contains 10 times less embodied carbon than conventional brick, but made out of 100% natural material. Half the price of a regular fired brick, but offering a stronger and more durable material to construct a climate resilient home. Next slide, please. This is our third phase of the research, and in 2019, we received United Nations most prestigious risk award for this concept, and also listed as best research in arts and social science by the Times Higher Education. Next slide, please. So, as educator, we want to spread this knowledge to the rest of the world. We have designed a school inspired by the beehives, and now we are on the way to establish our first sustainable Pathshala, a Bengali form of primary schools in Bangladesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nadan. We'll have some questions, no doubt, for you shortly, and thanks for the showing the brick as well. Hopefully you could see that online. Really interesting. I need to have a look at that shortly. So our final panelist, welcome to Ole Larsen from DHI. Welcome, sir. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll start the time. You asked the question, what can we do to combat climate change? How can we keep into the 1.5 degree? What is our role? And one of the clear things that happens and have happened for us and with us and against us is urbanization. Next slide, please. We have had a world where the urban population has been growing rapidly. The rural population is slowly in a decline. People move into cities, and cities are actually a part of the solution to climate change. Next, please. Cities are interesting because we need to have joint utilities in the cities. We make the utilities in an efficient way. We share them. But we have challenges: energy footprint of water, water footprint of energy. Next slide, please. And we have, of course, infrastructure that we are sharing over large distances. And we can point towards many of these different things in a water system, around a system, and point towards things that can malfunction or may function good or bad in city systems. Leakages around the world is famous. Next slide, please. Furthermore, we have also seen examples of rainwater harvesting that we are dealing with, or rainwater management, stormwater situations. In Denmark, we have for decades just thought that the stormwater would be something we should emit into the ocean as fast as possible. Now we understand that we have to keep it as long as possible and use the water resources for other things. Next slide, please. So where are we heading? What do we need to do? Well, we have to have sustainable urban environments. We have to utilize the fact that people living in cities use much less resources per capita than what we do on land. It is much smarter to supply infrastructure. There are more people per meter pipe. There are more people per meter cable. It is cheaper. It is in many ways counterintuitive possibly, but it is the climate-friendly people live in cities in small apartments. Next slide. So what do we need to innovate? Well, we have heard it already. And this is actually a mission that we have been on all the time since Lyndon Johnson's advisory board in '65 talked about climate change being something that would be real. We have seen it as real. We have seen climate changes, but the societal changes we have seen have been much, much bigger, much more pronounced. So we have been working all the time, actually in working to close the water loop, to have a circular economy for water. So think of water as a resource we have to keep, reuse it, reduce our consumption, reuse it, and renew it. We have worked on closing the water loop in countries like Singapore. And when you think of water systems and a system, it encompasses so many components. And in all these different components, we have an ability to share knowledge around them. And this is actually a part of the problem. And I think this is where the true innovation is needed. So we need to have some partnerships in order to get things out. Next slide, please. Solving wicked problems, solving a problem where innovation is brought out to people, where it is not just a knowledge transfer. Take a course with me because I'm smarter than you. That is not what we're doing. We need to have a system that is functioning. And the system functions with all the bits and pieces around the system. So we have effectively been working with the Living Lab strategies. Living Labs are perfect systems to solve wicked problems and to communicate and to encompass entire value chains. This is an example of a value chain built up in a Living Lab to promote climate adaptation in a city like Copenhagen, using the strength of utilities, municipalities, industries, universities, and citizens, but tying them together in a functioning system. And that would be my closing word, that's one reason we are here in the Water Pavilion, because this actually offers a part of such system to us. This offers the place where we can interact, communicate, and work together, because we need to not only develop the bolts and the ties and the small things, we have to make the systems work, and the system is interfaces we have to break down and we have to smear them. And there we can use, for instance, Living Labs. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Really interesting presentation. I think you'll see the connections, and I hope you saw them, that I did as well, between the panel and the previous panel today. So we have time for a couple of quick questions, either from the room or online. If there's a microphone, anybody got a question? Otherwise, I will use. So if that microphone comes to the front, we can use that as well. So thank you. So my question really to the panelists. So we've heard some great innovation today, and I think it's been touched on. But to take this innovation to scale, perhaps what do you see as the big barriers? Just one or two things from both of you. Just keep, what are the barriers that we need to address to take this innovation to scale? Thank you.
This is a very important concern. We think technology part was relatively easier, but when the designing of upscaling comes, the systemic changes are more important. For example, when we started this research, there was a reason for that. First is the embodied carbon of conventional fired brick is around 250 kilogram per meter cube, which is quite high. If we want to reduce that, we found that technology, but the problem is now the existing industries are the competitors. If they want to shift their technology to this new one, then they need further investments. If we go to the society, making people believe that these products are superior, cheaper, and good alternatives, we need to educate them. So those kind of systemic level changes and changes in the building codes of each of the countries will be the most difficult part. So yeah, that's the biggest barrier of this kind of innovations.
No, thank you. No, Dan, thank you. Really wise words there. Same question, or if I may.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
I think that was also the question I tried to address. Essentially, there is a lot of technology push. There are so many organizations that are doing excellent research and make excellent products and fail in bringing them to market. And one reason is, among other, that water infrastructure is a capex expensive industry. We talk in an industry, especially when it's urban infrastructure, in utilities that may have a depreciation time of 75 years of a water pipe or a pump or wastewater treatment plant. So the energy is maybe not at a place where you are trying things. You're not very happy to try things out if you are bound with a bad solution for 50 years, because that may be the scale it is to renew it. So I think that is a place where the sharing among, for instance, the customers is important. It is amazing that if you make treatment technology like we heard from the other innovator, how do you bring that out? Should you go out to each individual, and should you sell that to each individual? Why can't we have a kind of community of the buyers who actually test technology to understand the technology, enabling its application and its scale up? So I think that we often do not use the power of the utilities, municipalities and organizations because they're individualist and silos. That is exactly who we want to bring together in a living lab, because that is a free space where you can do it. And we need that free space for sharing to be actually testing and be challenging what we are doing today.
No, thank you so much. It's a shame we've got to bring this part of the session today to a close, but let me just reflect on what I've heard. And I think you've made the points very well. Is that innovation isn't just a solo activity. We need to collaborate. We need to bring the whole value chain together to land that innovation and scale it. So although the ideas may come from a small group of people, actually everybody needs to be involved in that. So thank you for shining a light on that. And can I just do a quick round of thank yous to everybody who's been involved in today. So thank you to a really great start of the day with His Excellency Professor Hani Sir-William, Minister from Egypt. A really interesting start, really set us up well for the whole of today, really thinking about knowledge, innovation and technology. I hope you all agree with that. We've had some fascinating bursts today from our innovators in 2 sessions. Thank you for sharing, but also I think thank you for connecting as well. What I liked was there was a lot of connection there between those presentations. Hopefully, through the course of today and the week, further collaboration can happen. We had a few provocations, I suppose, that we'll leave up for the course of today. Really trying to think, where is the role of innovation looking to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius? So a really wicked problem. So to steal some words there from Old, there's a lot of work to be done. So we can't just rest on that. So those questions will remain up. And also you can interact with them online. So please get involved. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We'll be sharing them in due course. So your great work, we'll collate that and share that at the end of the session. And I think that's it, really, just to thank the organisers of today. A special thanks to Siwi, our host here, and others. A big thanks to Louise Ellis, who's been running the show from the back, and the Siwi team. And thanks to those who are not in the blue zone, but you'll all recognise there's lots of people who actually put these things on. So many thanks for those who've helped put the session on together. Big thanks to you, the audience, as well, and to those online. So thank you for engaging. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your really interesting questions, because I think this is not a broadcast. This is a conversation. So thank you all. I'll close now. Martin Schuler from Arup, very pleased to have been part of today's Knowledge, Innovation and Technology. Thank you very much. Thank you. May I? I can't find them. I think it's sort of LinkedIn now, isn't it? So we'll be putting some LinkedIn stuff. So if you want to interact with that, we'll call you out. You on LinkedIn? So we'll find you on LinkedIn. We'll do a note. Good. How do you think the event went? feel tired at the end of the day, you don't know why. Yeah. It's mentally and physically draining. Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem with the speakers was. It's perfectly fine. I think the problem is that they stand here and want to do it like this, but it works. I don't know why. I don't know what the problem was.
No, not the problem. He cannot use this one.
Hmm.
All the people is not has technology to go
Uh,
to this. No, it's all.
Yeah.
shared is and why we are here is because there is a huge challenge and an opportunity, right? We've seen, I was in a meeting at the Stockholm Water Week, and there we were with a lot of partners that were involved in the water sector. And they said it's very crowded in the urban water resilience space. Well, it better be crowded in the urban water resilience space because it is extremely challenging, the challenge that cities are facing currently. I'm leading the Ross Center for Sustainable Cities of World Resources Institute, and we work in 10 countries globally. Among others, Mexico. 2/3 of local authorities in Mexico, they face severe water challenges. So that is a big hurdle. I mean, it puts people at risk, but it's also a big hurdle for the economy. How can you kind of allocate kind of companies, businesses within your city fringes when you don't have access to water? And cities, they face multiple challenges, and they're all interdependent. So on one hand, how to provide water. On the other hand, how to protect water. How to deal with the impacts of climate change and rapid urbanization with growing demands for water. So you can imagine, you know, if you're in a city in whatever, Ethiopia, if you're Dire Dawa in Ethiopia, how you deal with this at a systemic way. And especially that systemic way is something where I see the opportunity with the partners that are here among us in the audience and that are part of our ongoing conversation. So is the right partnership to kind of bring collective action so that cities can resolve water in a more systemic way. 3.5 years ago, we started with the Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. We started a project which is called the Urban Water Resilience Initiative for cities in sub-Saharan Africa. So I want to focus a little bit on sub-Saharan Africa, but as the challenge is spreading or is prevalent in all countries, pretty much, and now increasingly also in Europe, the water stress in European cities is high and increasing. We did some research on that. So, but I want to share a bit on what we have done in sub-Saharan Africa. And don't worry, I keep it. I really keep it brief. So at COP27, so in Sharm el-Sheikh, we launched the Aqua Partnership, the African Cities Adaptation Partnership, and we brought cities and partner organizations in sub-Saharan Africa together to create a movement to collectively address water challenges in cities. And they had a tool which we are developing right now, which is called the Aqua Fund. And the Aqua Fund is there to channel blended finance to more innovative solutions in cities. And cities often, for addressing systemically the water cycle, don't need one or two $100 million investments. They often need multiple smaller projects to address multiple smaller challenges that are, you know, present in communities, along rivers. So the fund is an opportunity kind of to channel bigger money and to distribute it into cities for more innovative finance. Very practices that are very promising to help to address the whole water cycle, among others, are, you know, household level water harvesting, our nature-based solution for wastewater treatment, our nature-based solution for stormwater management, non-revenue water. So if you put all these things in place, you create a system that is sustainable for the longer term. And we've been spearheading that and creating a pipeline of projects in 6 cities in sub-Saharan Africa, in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and in Johannesburg. And this is exemplary, I think, for what should happen, because we got a lot of interest of other countries too, what should happen in many places. How to direct money to more innovative solutions. And on the other hand, is how can we help cities and administrators to understand how they can channel money from existing funds. Because our research showed that, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, you have 35 water programs and funds that are available to invest in water projects. But can you imagine that you are a that you are a civil servant in Musanze in Rwanda. For us, it is already difficult to understand the financial architecture around. So it's very difficult if you're a civil servant to kind of connect those dots. So that platform of partners and the Aqua Fund, which is an example on how to funnel resources to cities, is meant to create collective action and address systemically the water cycle in cities. I am very happy, and these are my last remarks, I'm very happy to see that it is very crowded in the urban water resilience space. It can't be more, it should be more crowded. And we've also seen, it's very good to see right now that the COP presidency sees urban water resilience as one of the key outcomes of their three kind of water deliverables here at the COP in Dubai. For us, it was also, and for everyone, it was very encouraging to see that at the Africa Climate Summit, at the Nairobi Declaration, said we need to invest more in urban infrastructure, including water. And it is good to see that, for example, the Africa Water Investment Program is aiming to close Africa's water investment gap, with mobilizing at least 30 billion per year by 2030. That's the aspiration. So you see multiple efforts, and that is the only way to get things done. And this COP, today and yesterday, there is the Local Climate Action Summit, where 62 countries submitted to support cities and to make cities more prominently featured in their NDCs of 2025. And that coordinated approach, that multi-level governance, that partnership approach, that is what we need. And this is why I'm happy to be here together with many of us and discuss how to kind of move that forward as a movement to build resilience in cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rogier, for opening this session. We really appreciate it. And I echo your thoughts. It being crowded in the urban water resilience space is definitely a good thing and should be seen that way. There's plenty to go at. I'm delighted today that we are joined by Jennifer Gerardo, the City Resilience Officer from Broward County in Southeast Florida, as well as Minister David Suburinas, apologies, the Minister of Climate Action, Food and Rural Agenda for the Government of Catalonia in Spain. I would like to invite you both initially to maybe share some of the water challenges that your regions are facing and some of the water initiatives that you're working on to tackle and to further climate resilience. Maybe start with you, Jennifer.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the conversation. In Southeast Florida, many are probably quite familiar with the extreme challenges that face our communities. I'm located in Broward County. We have 31 cities, about 24 miles of shoreline, hundreds of miles of small canals that provide conduits. They're intertidal canals bringing coastal water miles inland to our landscape. We're squeezed between the Everglades and the Atlantic Ocean. We're flat. We are completely built out as an urban community. We have essentially no land available for redevelopment or new development or water storage. And it's a very constraining environment. Sea level rise is obviously one of the most pressing challenges for a community like ours, with elevation just a few feet above sea level. We have tidal flooding. We have groundwater table rise as a function of sea level. The groundwater table has risen a couple of feet already in the coastal area. It contributes to drainage and flood control issues. We have a 1,800-mile canal network that provides drainage for flood control for our entire urban community. And this canal network relies on the ability for water to drain downhill from higher water levels inland to lower water levels at the coast. And with sea level rise, that system is reversing, very much exacerbating flood conditions and preventing our release of stormwater during major rain events. And that's a dramatic issue as we have about 60 inches of rainfall a year. This last year, we actually had 100. And trying to manage that volume of water where you have no water storage and rely upon a canal network to provide drainage for an entirely flat landscape is a dramatic, ever-growing challenge. We are well behind where we need to be with regards to infrastructure enhancements, and it is one of the most complex challenges we're dealing with as it relates to climate change. I do want to acknowledge that compound flooding is another area of dramatic challenge because of the combination of groundwater table rise, storm surge, king tides, extreme rainfall events, all coalescing. We may have a supermoon, the slowing of the Gulf Stream. We never have the luxury of just one pressure, but they come in combination. And so the challenge is to approach scenario-based adaptation improvements in which we're accounting for this very complex layering of pressures as it affects the spatial extent, the duration, the depth of flooding. And rainfall intensification is yet one additional complication in trying to assess the extreme conditions for the future. And finally, I would just note on water supply issues. We have a great deal of saltwater intrusion into our coastal well field, coastal aquifer, making major investments to deal with that impact on urban water supply. And then I would also note that as we have increased challenges with regards to water storage during these extreme events, it limits the ability to provide the adequate level of water quality treatment that we would want to put in place to protect our coastal water resources and systems such as our coral reefs. And so we feel an immense amount of pressure to be responsible environmental stewards while also meeting the dramatic challenges that face our urban environment. And I would agree, water resilience is one of the most pressing issues for many of our communities, and it's good to see that we have so many enthusiastic participants in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I was particularly taken with your comments around overlapping and combining challenges. I think that's something that we often overlook when we talk about water. We may talk about one of them in isolation, for example, sea level rise, but we don't acknowledge that that comes with saline intrusion. It also comes at the same time that we're experiencing heavier rainfall patterns. So thank you. Minister, the same question for you. If you could share some of the water challenges that you're facing in Catalonia and some of the water resilience initiatives that you're progressing, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Bé, bon dia a tots i totes i d'entrada gràcies. Gràcies per deixar-nos venir aquí a parlar dels problemes que tenim amb l'aigua, que al final, aquests dies parlant amb gent de Califòrnia o de Bio a Xile o ara sentint la gent de Florida, ens adonem que tot el planeta està passant el mateix. I és que de cop tenim tota una sèrie de problemes amb els recursos que no teníem. Llavors, allò que ens deien que passaria el 2040 o el 2050, ens ho hem trobat a sobre, avui, ja. Estan traduint? Ah, perdó. Ens els estem trobant avui ja a sobre i hem de reaccionar de cop contra molts problemes que pensàvem que vindrien de forma successiva.
So thank you very much for having me today with you in this round panel discussion. What we are seeing and what we're hearing from the different countries, we hear in Chile, we're hearing now from Florida, and from all over the world, the challenges we now have, we were supposed to be having them in 2040, 2050, and here we are, having to cope with all of these issues simultaneously. So I can only start by saying that in Catalonia, we do share all of this multitude of factors, that they're overlapping, and we also need to cope with something we're really not prepared for, because we were expecting this to happen in like 20 years.
Estàvem acostumats a tractar els problemes de forma successiva, primer un i després l'altre, i ara ens trobem amb molts problemes multifactorials que hem de tractar tots de cop. També tenim problemes de salinització de l'aigua en algunes parts del territori, també ens està pujant el nivell del mar en altres indrets. Ens estem trobant fa 3 anys i pràcticament 4 amb unes inundacions molt grans a la nostra regió, a Catalunya, i ara portem 37 mesos d'una sequera, la més dura des que tenim dades dels últims 110 anys.
So let me start from the back so I don't forget the figures because I'm all retaining it in my head. We've had the hardest drought for 37 years, 37 months. 37 months and sorry, the years was 110 and we had 37 months of drought. That's why I didn't want to get the figures confused. So this is the situation. And regarding the factors that we are trying to cope with, we also have intrusion of saline waters. We have increase of waters from the sea levels, floods that are tremendous. So we have the same multitude of factors and we were used to dealing with factors one at a time. And now we need to deal with all of those factors simultaneously.
I per resoldre el problema de l'aigua, per ser més resilients a l'escassetat d'un recurs que ens pensàvem infinit, ens veiem amb l'obligació de tractar de fer diferents actuacions en diferents àmbits, sempre amb l'objectiu de tancar el cicle i que no perdem ni una gota d'aigua d'un recurs que cada vegada és més escàs i que ens veiem amb la necessitat i l'obligació de canviar la nostra forma de tractar aquest recurs de manera que no perdem ni una gota d'aigua en tot el cicle.
And also we're finding ourselves putting out fires in simultaneous places at the same time and trying to guarantee that not a single drop of water is wasted. So every action, every project we do in our cities have to close the loop and make sure that we do have a closed cycle and, as I said, not a drop of water is wasted.
Segur que tindrem temps d'entrar en més detall, però el tractament d'aigües residuals, l'obtenció de més recurs des de la desalinització a la regeneració de l'aigües residuals, a l'obtenció d'aigua freàtica en pous que abans els fèiem a 30 o 40 metres i ara hem d'anar a 100 metres fons. És a dir, l'obtenció de més recurs per un costat, però sobretot la reutilització del recurs fins que que tots plegats siguem capaços de reutilitzar l'aigua amb un cicle infinit que no perdem ni una gota.
So in this attempt of not wasting a single drop of water and closing the cycle of the water, what we're doing is coping with water treatment, recycling of wastewaters, and also in the old days we used to just drill 30, 40 meters to go to the underground water levels. Now we need to go 100 meters to go to the underground water. So, but in all of that we shouldn't lose sight that we have to close the circle to make sure that we don't waste any water and everything we recycle and we use, it has to be not wasted. Water used to be thought as an infinite resource and it's finite. So we now know it's no endless resource.
I al mateix temps, en el curt termini, hem d'actuar davant la situació de sequera extrema que tenim i, per tant, ja estem en emergència, hem hagut de començar a fer restriccions d'aigua a l'àrea metropolitana de Barcelona, per exemple. Tenim els embassaments al nivell més baix de la història del nostre país, estem al 18% de la seva capacitat i, per tant, hem de combinar la visió a mig i llarg termini amb la visió a curt, amb les actuacions a curt, per poder poder allargar més la poca aigua que tenim.
And in the city of Barcelona, for instance, we've already started with water restriction, so we have to start there. Our dams and our water reservoirs are at 18% of what they should be. So we have to cope with projects, not just in the short term, but we have to think of the mid and the long term whenever we have an action. And all of those restrictions are already ongoing. And as I said, all projects at the same time, no wasting a single drop.
Thank you very much, Minister. Today we're focusing on some of the knowledge, innovation and technologies as a day that are needed to further and improve water resilience. I'm wondering if there are particular innovations in your regions that you're proud of that you want to share today. Maybe start with you, Jennifer.
Sure. I think that there's a couple of things that we're working on that are perhaps a little bit more advanced, I guess, in terms of our ability to integrate across so many issues. We have developed and apply in our work extremely complex integrated hydrologic models that now allow us to bring in all those factors that I previously described for long-term assessment of our future conditions. But what's more significant about that is that we've actually been able to bring future conditions planning into our regulatory processes. So now all new infrastructure that's designed in our communities has to account for the water conditions 50 years from now. We use about a 50-year planning horizon. So if we're looking at drainage wells and retention areas and surface water management systems, we require all of those investments to plan for about a 2-foot increase in the groundwater table. So that'll help ensure that 50 years from now, the drainage and water management systems that are site-specific are still serving that investment. We've also brought in those same requirements, accounting for sea level rise, combination of high tide and surge, to what we call tidal barrier standards, so seawalls, berms, marinas, anywhere where we could possibly have tidally influenced waterways. We have new standards for all that infrastructure. We've also updated our finished floor elevations for our building requirements to account for those same combinations. So I feel like we've made significant advancements as it relates to new infrastructure. We can talk perhaps later about the challenges where we have existing infrastructure. And that is another whole matter, because a lot of our landscape, we don't anticipate it being redeveloped. And so how are we going to deal with those same pressures where the redevelopment opportunities are not anticipated? Additionally, I would say that the challenges that we've faced have also led to a much more multi-jurisdictional solutions. The scale of some of the investments that are needed are simply well beyond what local government can afford on our own. And we did not have, prior to this decade, a single water project that reflected a public-private investment. And we spent about 15 years in negotiations, and we were finally able to arrive at a water supply solution, helping to deal with the fact that we have no storage for these very large water volumes of rainfall. We have no land, but areas further north do. And so what they're dealing with, though, are similarly flood issues, excessive discharges to natural systems, and they have a need to hold on to more water, but no funding to create the projects. So we have water utilities in the south that need water. We have environmental conditions in the north where there's no funding source. So we were able to bring 3 counties together with a public-private partner and create a 35 million gallon per day in-ground water reservoir that's located to our north, where we can now route that stored water to areas of need and capture water where the water is actually creating an environmental liability. So it was a project that none of us could have afforded on our own. Many of us lacked the land to be able to envision a project like that in our own jurisdictions. But we brought, again, public-private partnership and 15 years of work to create a project that is, I think, the epitome of what we need to do with regards to resilient water infrastructure.
Jennifer, that's wonderful. Probably one of the few innovations in the governance space that we've heard about today, and absolutely fantastic to have that kind of collaboration in a region, probably a pinnacle of collaboration in the water space. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Minister, I'd be very interested to hear of the water innovations that you're pursuing in Catalonia.
A diferència de Florida, el problema que tenim nosaltres és que ens falta aigua. I, per tant, hem de fer inversions per obtenir més recurs. De fet, tenim 2 dessaladores en funcionament, una d'elles és la més gran d'Europa, que obté 60 hectòmetres cúbics l'any, aproximadament, que ve gent de tot el món a veure-la, per tant, esteu convidats a venir a veure-la.
60 hectòmetres cúbics. So we have quite the opposite of Florida. We don't have the problem of storing water because we just have no water. So we have to get the water from wherever we can. And we have 2 water treatment, saline water treatment plant. One of them is the biggest in Europe. I'm inviting you all to come over and visit. We have 60 hectometers, cube hectometers. So it's really huge. You're all invited. So that's our main concern, to get water from wherever we don't have it. So we have right the opposite.
I tenim ja en planificació l'ampliació d'una d'elles que genera 20 hectòmetres cúbics fins a 80 i la construcció d'una altra que en generarà 20 més. Per tant, doblarem la quantitat d'aigua desalada que obtindrem i que utilitzarem com a recurs davant d'aquesta manca d'aigua que tenim al nostre país.
So coupled with that big one I told you about, we have 2 smaller ones that have 20 cube hectometer capacity, and we're doubling that. So we will have 40 and 40. This is what we are planning for the future, so we will double the capacity.
I al mateix temps tenim tota una altra línia d'actuació d'obtenció d'aigua regenerada, és a dir, de depurar i potabilitzar l'aigua que utilitzem i que la tornem a posar a dintre el cicle. I doblarem la capacitat d'aigua regenerada que tenim en els propers 5 anys, de manera que amb les 2 actuacions pràcticament donarem abastament a tota l'àrea metropolitana de Barcelona sense necessitat d'utilitzar aigua d'embassaments.
So what we're doing also in terms of the recycled water that we're using at the moment and that we've been using in the past 5 years, we are also duplicating the capacity of these recycled waters. So with these 2 lines of action, the recycled wastewaters plus the water treatment, we will be covering the area, the metropolitan area of Barcelona.
És evident que aquestes inversions per un país com Catalunya són molt grans i que, per tant, cal fer un esforç molt gran per fer-les. Però és que no tenim una altra opció. Els països, les regions mediterrànies del món, ens trobem totes pràcticament en la mateixa situació i no tenim una altra opció que fer aquestes inversions tan grans per poder garantir l'abastament d'aigua a la nostra ciutadania.
And this problem of the huge investment that is required is shared by all Mediterranean regions. We have to make this huge investment, which for us is really huge, for us the regional authorities, but we really have no choice. We're all on the same boat and we just have to go and do it.
Thank you, Minister. I'm interested, we're talking today about the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, which is setting 2030 targets for water and climate resilience. We often find what gets monitored and measured gets funded. I'm interested in how you're measuring or planning to measure your improvements in water resilience. And maybe, Minister, you can kick us off.
No, ja.
Adaptation agenda.
Ok. Però abans, cal que totes aquestes bioregions mediterrànies especialment, però crec que és una qüestió que afecta a totes les regions, cal que ens plantegem una nova manera de viure, una nova manera de produir i una nova manera de consumir. Des del punt de vista que els recursos deixen de ser infinits i que, per tant, és possible quedar-nos sense recursos, com estem veient a moltes regions del món, cal replantejar-nos com utilitzem aquest recurs de manera més eficient.
So before we go into that, just something very important. We need to simply change our lifestyle because we were living on the basis that this was endless resources. We just don't have those endless resources. So it is a matter of adapting our lifestyle, the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we live has to be adapted to this new situation of not endless resources.
I el que fem és, des de ja fa pràcticament 5 anys, monitoritzar el consum d'aigua de totes les conques del nostre país. Aquí són diferents actors, el govern de la Generalitat, però també les administracions locals. En la forma que s'organitzin, n'hi ha que s'agrupen, he entès que és el cas de Florida, n'hi ha que ho fan de forma individual. I aquí la cooperació público-privada per la gestió d'aquest recurs també és molt important al nostre país.
And I heard from Florida that there was cooperation, multi-jurisdictional and different levels of administration cooperating to make projects happen. We are doing the same thing in Catalonia. We are measuring for the past 5 years the water that is consumed in our region. And for that purpose, we need the cooperation of regional and municipal authorities to make sure that the water is not wasted and that it goes beyond the simple regional level, because we can't just go with it at regional level only.
I llavors des del govern el que fem és, en base a aquestes dades, autoritzem unes dotacions d'aigua a cada municipi que en aquest moment, en emergència, en preemergència, les estem reduint, per tant cada vegada donem menys aigua als municipis perquè no en tenim més, però alhora fem mesures de recolzament als municipis perquè millorin la seva xarxa, el seu abastament, la reutilització de l'aigua, etc., perquè allarguin la vida d'aquest recurs.
So with the municipalities, we from regional level are doing like 2 lines of action. On the one hand, we are restraining, we are limiting the access they have, but on the other hand, we are supporting them. So whatever they do have is resilient and is long plan use, so they don't waste a single drop of water and everything is well channeled.
Thank you very much, Minister. Jennifer, a similar question to you, I guess, particularly in the context of multiple regions working together, or the multiple counties working together. How are you monitoring and measuring the improvement in water resilience in your region?
Well, on this particular point, I actually think I'd like to start with the county, Broward County, and then
Sure.
I'll try to
Absolutely.
contemplate where I can speak a little bit more regionally. I do want to acknowledge that Florida and Southeast Florida is a environment of extremes, and while I have been talking extensively about water management and flooding, we too have gone through very severe droughts, and because we don't have storage areas, when it's not raining, there is simply no water. We don't have, except for this new reservoir that's actually coming online this year, we don't have those backup water supplies. So we had launched very aggressive water conservation initiatives going back over the 15 years. We have extensive groundwater monitoring wells all throughout our county. We work with federal agencies, academic partners. We're monitoring groundwater levels, water quality, and that information not only lets us better understand what's happening with the resource, but it also helps to calibrate the models that we use for future planning. So we do quite a bit in the way of investments in infrastructure for monitoring. We, after probably 30 years of advocating with the federal government, we were finally able to get our own tidal offshore or nearshore tidal monitoring station. So we now have data about sea level rise and storm surge that's very specific to our community, our Port Everglades, our airport, not extracted from regional, nearby stations, and there can be quite a bit in the way of local distinctions. So we need that data to really develop the models that we need for planning. So we're huge advocates for data collection. At the same time, we also have experienced really dramatic conditions where we didn't have data available. And I'll note this last year, outside of our wet season, in our dry season, we received 26 inches of rain in 12 hours and experienced horrific flooding. It happened during rush hour in the most urban area, dense downtown area of our community. Thousands of vehicles were stranded. People couldn't get home. They were walking through water that was chest high. And you wouldn't have known what was happening on the ground. You couldn't have known until you found yourself in the midst of all of that. And the weather forecast, nothing had predicted anything of this magnitude, and nor had we even experienced anything like that, even during our most severe tropical storms and hurricanes. So what we learned from this event was that we need to have more real-time data of our stormwater systems that are letting us know when are the storm systems being filled up, what's happening instantaneously with our canal levels, video feeds that show you what the street conditions look like, and ways that we can use that information to provide real-time alerts to help better communicate when we're experiencing conditions of this nature, because clearly it won't be the first time. And in fact, just several months later, in December of this year, we had another event that was quite out of the ordinary as well, with about a foot of rainfall in a day. And so, we're experiencing conditions like many that we've never experienced historically, but we've been more invested in long-term, water resource monitoring and less in this kind of instantaneous collection of data. So that's been an area where we're appreciating a need for more active organization of resources. And I think I can go ahead and maybe stop with that, except on the regional basis, I mentioned this massive canal network. It's not unique to our county. It's a network that supports all of our counties, and it's failing. And if we don't have data to communicate how that network is failing, and the fact that when it's raining, we can't discharge water any longer because we have to wait for 4 hours until the tide to drop, and that means that 2/3 of the county is flooding while we just, are awaiting the tidal levels to decline. That information is so vital when we talk about exposures today, losses today, and are looking for the types of federal partnerships that are needed to upgrade infrastructure, where again, it's well beyond the capabilities of local government to manage those system upgrades that are serving and they're part of regional networks.
Thank you very much, both. Particularly, go ahead, Minister.
És que tenim el mateix problema, és a dir, i enllaço, si vols, amb la darrera pregunta, de com els estats ens haurien d'ajudar. A veure si sembla.
Yeah. If you are okay with this, because we have the same problem that has just been mentioned, and this leads me on to the third question. So if you allow me, I go into the third question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Les regions ens trobem en situacions extremes amb les quals no ens havíem trobat mai. Per tant, ens hem de preparar per a aquestes situacions. Fan falta dades, moltes dades, per poder analitzar bé què està passant, però després fan falta moltes inversions. I, per tant, com que no tenim accés a fons de finançament de tants recursos, tenim molt difícil poder fer aquestes inversions. Llavors, en fòrums com aquests, on els estats decideixen i prenen els seus posicionaments, les regions no hi tenim pràcticament veu, que som al final els que hem d'acabar executant totes aquestes polítiques que es decideixen aquí. I per tant és molt important que per primera vegada a la COP es parli dels ens subnacionals, però seria més important encara que poguéssim tenir-hi veu directa per poder decidir conjuntament què és el que hem de fer i com s'ha de fer.
So I'd like to take this opportunity that we are here at COP, where the states decide for states, but we are regions. And at the end of the day, we are the ones implementing things in the field, but we don't have the resources, and we don't have the access to the funds of investment that the states have, and yet they make the decision for us. So it's important that we are getting together the regions, so our voices can not only be heard, but we are given mandates, so we can actually do things on site, implementing projects with funds that we would not have access to otherwise.
Perquè al final, en alguns casos, com Catalunya, tenim pràcticament les competències exclusives amb la gestió de l'aigua. Llavors, l'Estat pràcticament es desentén del que passa en els nostres territoris i som nosaltres, les regions, els que hem de fer totes les polítiques per poder garantir l'abastament d'aigua a la nostra ciutadania. Llavors, en no tenir presència on es prenen les decisions i no tenir accés a les fonts de finançament per inversions tan grans, realment ho tenim complicat per poder fer actuacions a curt termini que solucionin el problema per a la nostra ciutadania.
So we could say that the regions have their hands tied up because we have the problem, but we don't have the resources. We don't make the decisions, we don't have the voice to say what we think about it. So they should give us, because we have full mandate delegation on us, on the regions, to get along with the water policies and to just decide. So we would require from the states, number one, to give us voice, number two, to help us to manage because we don't have the resources, and number three, to provide with forums like this so we can all discuss and come up with final solutions.
I encara segurament és més greu per les administracions locals. Les de les ciutats i els pobles encara ho tenen més complicat perquè les inversions per ells també són molt grans i tenen encara més dificultat per accedir a fons que els hem de proveir des del govern i no poden accedir a altres fons de finançament.
And if we, the regions, have problems, can you imagine the cities and the villages even more? Because they come to us and we can't just help them because we don't have the funds to provide them. We are not given the funds and they don't have it. So it's a cascade of deficiencies that, there's nothing we can do about it.
Jennifer, if I can ask you to maybe wrap up this panel and answer a similar question to the Minister around how you're engaging with national government and what you need from them, given that COP28, as the Minister alluded to, is a national commitments are made.
Thank you so much. Well, I think I can quickly integrate what I wanted to say in addition.
Perfect.
Which is that to the point about identifying our needs, here in Broward County, again, we have 31 municipalities. Clearly, those cities don't have the capacity to develop the same hydrologic models, to process all of the data, to bring together the team of experts that we need to do that type of work. So we've spent the last several years building municipal support, working with the business community to gain support for the development of a full county-wide resilience plan that will focus on the infrastructure and redevelopment strategies that will need to be shared across this common landscape on 50-acre basin level segments. And so it's not dictating solutions, but figuring out the collective of water management needs that we need organized investment in. And that's really critical because as we're advocating for this same investment by the federal government with respect to the regional canal network, we need to have an assurance that what we're doing locally will be met by an equivalent level of service that the regional system can provide, and that the regional system is accounting for what we need to deliver in the way of local discharges to that regional system. So they absolutely have to work together, and one of our greatest complaints has been the delay on the federal side, is that local governments, we're 10 years ahead of what we need from the federal government. And so what I would say is we need stepped up planning, we need coordinated planning so that we're utilizing the same scenarios. We need the agencies to quit changing the requirements midstream so that we can actually get plans and projects done and not always be in planning limbo. And then finally, we do need better access to the funding. And it does need to come directly to local governments. And we don't need, the funds to be tied up in administrative costs that occur at the state level, or an alternative set of priorities that are not fully aligned with what we need locally. And so much more, and I would say the funding sources need to allow flexibility. And I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister and Jennifer. I speak for everybody here where I really appreciate the on-the-ground insights that you've shared with us, the challenges you face, but also some of the solutions around the policy, governance, financing, and technological space. Thank you very much.
Always smiling, fantastic. I'll take a couple, one last one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
we are briefly going to just reconfigure the panel. So I would like to invite up to join us the representatives from the Resilient Water Accelerator, Resilient Cities Network, and C40 teams, please. I'm going to sit down. Tech team, are we able to change the presentation slide to the next one, please? If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down for the next panel and maybe get a little bit more cozy here with some of our colleagues and partners in the water space. We're delighted today to be joined by Lauren Sorkin from the Resilient Cities Network, Kate Hughes from the Resilient Water Accelerator, Sachin Bhatt from C40 Cities, and Martin Schuler from Arup. In this session, we're going to explore some of the initiatives in the urban water resilience space. We heard from Rogier at the start that it's a very, I won't say crowded, busy space. I'm going to go with productive, dynamic space. And so I'm hoping to explore, thank you very much. I'm hoping to explore those initiatives today. We're going to start with Lauren. Lauren, you work across many of the cities involved in the programs that we're going to talk about today. What do you see as your role as a city network in bridging the gap to national government, the NDCs and the NAPs? We heard from the Minister and from Jennifer some of the challenges that they face in this space.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, and thanks for making the space for Resilient Cities Network for us to share some of the work we do. I think just to start out, it's important that we take perhaps 2 steps back before we jump forward into what's happening in this really dynamic space. Resilient Cities Network is 100 city leaders, 100 mayors, governors, 100 cities in 40 countries that are working to build holistic resilience. So when we show up to a conversation, and our cities really show up to a conversation, there's a very firm acknowledgement that it's about cities as a system, right? When we talk about different issues, whether it's climate and health, climate and water, and you'll hear a lot of that this week, right? It's very important to understand in a systemic way what's happening and that those challenges are transversal. And the work that we've been doing with everyone on this panel is foundational to that. So when you talk about the role of city networks, and in particular, Resilient Cities as a city network, our perspective, our framework, our methodology, and our way of working with cities is holistic. Because for a citizen who's on the ground, who's experiencing what Jennifer talked about or what the Minister from Catalonia talked about, in a traffic jam or if their house is flooding, they aren't thinking about an individual system, and they're certainly not thinking about an individual framework or solution, right? They're just thinking about a problem that they have. And so it's very important to take that holistic view. So as we look at what is the role of City Network specifically in doing this work, there's really 3 things that are very, very critical. And I think this is something that's applicable to systems change quite writ large, but it's so fundamental that we often get it wrong because we want to jump to solutions. We want to jump to that problem solver, right? We want to jump to that investment. But what's really critical is you have to have the right framework in place. So you have to have, from that national level adaptation plan, national level action plan, national level NDCs, right? Your nationally determined commitments as well, right? These are already layers of plans. So it's very important for city networks and the organizations we work with to break that down and to create frameworks and definitions that work at a local level so that cities don't have to create a new plan, right? I don't want to report on a new set of indicators. I want those indicators to meet me where I am. And so it's our job to help translate that and to try to make that planning, reporting very much a part of what cities need to do anyhow to get it right. The second thing after the framework work is actually to carry that through into planning and analysis. And a lot of the work that we've done, in particular with Arup, around the city water resilience assessment that we've run now on almost every nearly 20 cities. Thank you, Martin. That it's something that you can actually apply very, very specifically to a whole of a city's water system and get from that common definition and framework to projects. And that's really important. So that's that second, that bridging thing. And the third that's extremely important, and I think we don't do it well enough, is to demand that there is proactive financing. We had such an exciting moment on the first day of COP, which is that the Loss and Damage Fund was announced, more commitments were announced, so that's fantastic. But do we really want to keep getting to major losses and damages? No. We want to prioritize investing in the right kind of infrastructure ex ante. And that's really challenging. We have to do a much better job saying, don't put $25 billion towards the easy places and $5 billion towards our LMICs. Let's look at those population centers. Let's look at what the data tells us about where we need to go, and let's put the investments there. So that's, I think, the third role of city networks is actually bridging what those national needs are and where they need to be deployed locally to protect the greatest number of people.
Thank you, Lauren. And your comment about financing, I think, bridges really nicely to Kate and your question. The Resilient Water Accelerator, which you're working on, is bringing together visions for resilience in cities to implementation. How are you developing those solutions sufficiently to attract that financing?
Well, thank you. And yes, so I'm Kate Hughes from the Resilient Water Accelerator, and that was a brilliant segue. So thank you for kind of setting this up. And the challenge in so many of the places we're looking at is turning that need and those commitments and the hopes in cities and other locations to become more resilient, but turning those into actual investment on the ground, because you can have all of the commitment and ideas and plans, but if those don't actually translate into change on the ground, and that needs investment on the ground to make that happen, then it doesn't mean very much. So again, as you were saying, in terms of COPs, there are huge commitments being made, and countries make commitments and cities make commitments, but those have to be translated into actual change on the ground, and that needs money. And that's where we come in as the Resilient Water Accelerator, and again, working with all of the people up here on the stage to bring together those partnerships to catalyse and mobilise public and private finance into actual projects. But yes, it isn't happening at the scale and speed that it needs to happen. At only 3% of total climate finance is going into water. So there is huge demand and a huge financing gap, and that's partly because actually we aren't getting into that specificity of what does that money actually need to go into, and that's what we're then trying to do in these countries as well. So where do we start? And actually, we're starting in a very similar place. It is a systems. You have to understand water is not just something by itself, and each location, each city has got its own individual challenges and own individual context and needs. So we're starting there in order to understand how water fits into that wider system, and similarly working with Arup on their CWRA approach to really understand what does this mean. So in Lagos, we're doing this to understand what's happening now. What are the problems? What are the challenges? What are the barriers to investment? What's the governance? What's happening? And from that, we can then start to prioritise and understand which projects, what portfolio of projects need to come together, need to be invested in order to overcome those challenges. And similarly, what we're not doing and then is thinking about individual ad hoc discrete projects. You could pick off the really easy ones, but which investments are really needed to transform the experience of the most vulnerable people in these cities, and where we can bring that together. Again, thinking about this in a systems way. So in Lagos, what then starts to come through is that the challenges are, yes, around governance and the different government agencies not talking to each other and not being joined up. There is also an energy challenge. Water is connected into energy, so a lot of the infrastructure is moribund, a word I've heard a huge amount in Lagos, because actually it's as much about water as it is about energy, and it's much about flooding and transport and productivity and jobs and livelihoods. It's about clean water access, it's about drinking water, it's about sewage, it's about sea level rise and flooding. So all of these interconnected issues, which then feed into health, education, transport, livelihoods, and the government's own funding ability. We were with the governor of Lagos yesterday, who said, you know, he's got 22 million people in Lagos. It's the largest black city in the world, and his budget is $2 billion a year, which is the same that New York has just for its parks, for renovating and keeping up its parks. So public finance is not going to fill this funding gap. We need private finance to come in. So how do we do that? Well, private finance needs data. If you're going to find the right projects which are going to deliver a commercial return, you need to know what's going on. You need to know who your customers are, how much people are paying, what the need is, what the long-term vision is as well. This isn't just about building infrastructure and leaving it there. And again, that's where we're working with Arup and other partners to really understand what are those data needs, how can we provide that, and what is it going to be like in 10 years' time? We don't want to build projects that, you know, won't actually be fit for the future as climate change impacts continue to be felt and continue to change. What's the government doing? Is there government support? What are they doing behind all of this? What's the business model then, critically? How do we build something up that takes into account all of these things and starts to show those revenue streams? People do pay for water. People are paying for water. There are revenue streams. So that's what we're doing. We've got a big pipeline of over 40 projects in Lagos, which we are working through now. We're actively developing 6 or 7 of those to build that up so that actually we can take that data and that information to the private sector and to design these projects with them. Because again, I come back to partnerships. This isn't about discrete conversations. We need to bring everyone together, and that's why, for example, in Lagos as well, we're setting up a Lagos Water Partnership to bring those conversations together. So that's what we're trying to do. We'd love to work with all of you on this, and I'm very excited to be working with my partners up here.
Thank you, Kate. Before we come to Sachin, I'm maybe going to release Lauren so she doesn't have to sprint across the COP venue. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us, and get your trainers on, because I think you're now running. So, Kate, that was a fantastic reflection, particularly, I think, around building up that database and translating into the language of the financial institution so that we can attract the investment in the right areas in water in cities. Sachin, if I can come to you, C40 this week, maybe tomorrow, are launching the Water Safe Cities Accelerator at COP28. Can you share a little bit about the aims of the accelerator and how you're building the partnerships with and between cities?
Yes. Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here to talk with everyone and talk between people. So let me start with, first of all, not with C40, but with what I've heard so far on this panel. Roger started with saying this is a crowded space, and there are different partners who've been here for much longer in the water space, much deeper, much more local on the ground than C40 is, and as well as the problem is complex. I mean, we heard a lot from our cities, how complex it is in terms of the scale, the regional complexity, the impacts on the ground. So, how does all of this? What does C40 and what could C40 bring to this? Not another program that just kind of confuses everyone and crowds the space even further. So just to start with, I think just as an introduction, I'm Sachin. I'm the director for climate resilience for C40. C40 is also a city network. It's a network of 96 cities focused on climate actions, and within the urban resilience and climate resilience space, water is the #1 priority. And one of our aims is to make sure water is considered as important to the climate dialogue as carbon. And what we can bring, because C40 is a mayoral network as well as a technical network. As a mayoral network, we have 96 mayors committed to climate action. And at a technical level, we have technical networks with a smaller set of cities focused on urban flooding, droughts, coastal flooding, as well as other water-related commitments, including achieving net zero targets. So what C40 decided to do was to develop an initiative that is really focused on bringing mayoral commitment to achieving really ambitious targets that are applicable across different cities. Of course, different cities can meet the targets in a different way. In every city, the context is different. Cities start with where they are, but the Water Safe Cities Accelerator, which is going to be officially launched tomorrow, but has been publicly announced on the 22nd, is focused on supporting cities achieve key pathways to achieve water safe cities. The #1 and mandatory pathway is protecting the most vulnerable in cities, particularly by developing early warning systems and public information. Again, I think each city might do that differently. What cities call the most vulnerable, how they identify them, how they target them, might be different in Lagos, might be different in London, but there might be things that cities can learn from each other. Similarly, and then I think we have 3 other pathways. I won't go into the detail, but the key element of the pathways is the 3 pathways are optional. One is to protect the most vulnerable from extreme flooding. The second one is ensuring universal access to the most at-need people, and the last one is to transition and decarbonize water, particularly with waste systems, to net zero. And all of these commitments are time-bound. They're from 2030 to 2035, and cities have signed up to this. So now 17 cities across the globe have signed up to this, and they will be in the process then of setting baselines, developing roadmaps, and making public commitments to achieving this. Now, how can they achieve this? This is where I think a lot of coming back to partnerships, coming back to also to city-to-city collaborations. The role that C40 plays is a network not only between cities, so that cities don't feel that they're alone in this. So 2 cities that are trying to decarbonize their water systems, or 2 cities that have similar challenge. For example, we had an incredible workshop in Rotterdam where the city of Lagos had participated, and they, as well as the Quezon City, who are both about to be signatories. Lagos hasn't signed up yet, but they have requested a partnership between, for example, the city of Rotterdam and Quezon City, because they have, through the city-to-city collaboration that the platform that we can bring, understood that they need to they could improve their drainage system to mitigate floods in a way that takes a very long-term view and takes a very systemic view. And they can learn from other cities like Rotterdam, who've lived with floods for decades, if not centuries. So there are the way to deliver these commitments is through, again, partnerships and city-to-city collaborations. And this is what I'm here for, to kind of call for action in terms of understanding these commitments and supporting these cities through partnerships and through collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sachin. A strong theme of partnerships, and you guys have obviously been conferring because you've primed me nicely for Martin. Martin, Arup work quite often in the urban water resilience space, and particularly looking to build partnerships. How do we truly build partnerships on the ground, and how do partnerships help us improve and achieve our goal of climate resilience?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, Louise. But first of all, can I just reflect on the panel? And, we're all friends here. We're all working together. Effectively, as a partnership, you can see it live happening in front of you, live streamed. This is a partnership in action. So we're working with all the members of the panel in various places around the world. We're working with networks. We're working with Resilient Water Accelerator, Resilient Cities, and the C40. So, I mean, I think it kind of speaks to itself or for itself, but also just reflecting, as Sachin has on Roger's point about this is a crowded space. And I think that was quite challenging, I think, for us. I would say, actually, we're much more connected. We're very much connected. We're all bringing something slightly different. And I will also reflect that actually there's a lot of work for us to do. So I would invite into this crowded space more actors, not less. I think there's an alignment issue. We can do more on that. But I think there's more to be done. So yesterday I heard that 90% of climate impacts are going to be felt via water and through water. You know, just pause for effect. So much more to be done there. But just back to your point, really. So we're an engineering consultancy at Arup. So we bring some engineering and technical know-how. We're designers, and we're global. But how we entered into this space, I think, is really taking that system of systems thinking, and through that built something called the City Water Resilience Approach, which has been kindly mentioned already, which is very much an open source platform, and it's been built through partnership. So that partnership theme will repeat itself. So everybody here on the panel contributed, and many, many more were part of that. The key part of the City Water Resilience Approach is actually making it open source. So all the materials are freely available. The techniques and tools, which I'll come to in a moment, are open. That sort of trust and openness helps build partnerships. So you have to kind of be open to partnerships. They don't just happen. You might meet somebody in a coffee shop, but actually it's about building trust, mutual respect, and alignment, and also respecting what other organizations and individuals are bringing into that partnership. They have to be purposeful. They have to be there for a reason. So it's actually with that aim. And I think this panel here is actually very much aimed at that urban water resilience at that city scale. And when we talk about cities, we must also think about the city and the basin that a city sits within. So we talk about cities, but actually the basin connection to a city is super important. So you're thinking about the upstream and the downstream from a city, connecting, building those partnerships from outside the administration boundaries of a city into the catchment and the basin. Everybody in this panel will understand that, and it makes total sense. But actually, sometimes our governance structures might get in the way of that, so we might need to think about that and help build those partnerships. So the CWRA, in brief, is really simple. It builds a 5-step process from the understand. And again, I think reflecting on some of the points made by the panelists is actually, before we do anything, we've really got to understand the situation. So really understand what is the baseline of a city and its catchment. So that requires tools and techniques, and you can imagine there's a whole bunch of tools and techniques, but one that comes to mind, and it supports the City Water Resilience Approach, is a very simple tool. It's a digital tool called Our Water, which is an online digital engagement tool. So it's really simple. You could imagine it's a big piece of paper where everybody writes down, everybody they know in the water system writes down everybody and everything they know about the man-made and natural elements of water assets. Now, that information doesn't normally reside within a city and its catchment. That information isn't normally visible. But as soon as you make it visible and interactive and inclusive, so everybody is invited into that space, you get a much bigger picture of what's going on and who has responsibilities, who acts on water, who's impacted by water. That is a starting point to convene that partnership conversation. So understanding perhaps organizations, individuals, corporates, public, private organizations, they all touch water. So the first thing is kind of really understanding that landscape and spending some time getting to know each other. So connecting those into that space is a simple thing, highly effective, and it's the first thing that we'll do when we're going to think about the city water resilience approach. And it's been touched on, we've now deployed that in 20-odd cities. And also reflecting, it's not just about these engineering tools, it's about connecting people. People are probably the most important part of this conversation. It's not just the techniques and tools, but actually localizing the urban water resilience, making a common understanding around urban water resilience, a common language, a common narrative. And that all helps to build the trust around partnerships.
Thank you very much, Martin. We've heard today about many of the enablers in this space of building urban water resilience. Lauren talked about the need to step back, to look at how the national plans impact cities, to help cities kind of through that web. Kate, you've talked about some of the financing and funding challenges. Sachin, you've talked about particularly some of the challenges around partnerships and governance. And Martin, you've echoed them and talked about the need for some of the tools to bring people together on the ground to make kind of meaningful connections. Today we're talking about the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, which is looking to set adaptation targets in the urban water resilience space for 2030. Thinking about the outcomes of the different programs that we've heard today, how are you measuring the performance of your programs and the improvements in water resilience that you hope to achieve?
So it's a really good question about how do you measure impact in this space. And I think what's really lacking and the big challenge for adaptation resilience has been that lack of a single metric that we have in mitigation. People can point to carbon and it's a very clear global metric which transcends boundaries. And this has been the challenge for adaptation resilience. There isn't that equivalent easy, simple, transferable way of talking about adaptation and resilience. And I think that's where it's got stuck as well, between the conversations about absolutely important to have locally led adaptation, given how specific the challenges are to very local levels, making sure local communities are engaged. But it absolutely has to be connected into both the global, the national, the regional agendas too, into those plans, if financing, if action on adaptation resilience is going to take place. It's got to be on government agendas, it's got to be spoken about, it's got to be recognised as equal to mitigation as part of this challenge and as part of the stock take. And I think that's a really important aspect here as well at this COP, understanding the three parts of this global stock take are equally important and interlinked. Mitigation, adaptation and finance all have to be brought together. For us, actually, what we're discovering is there are very few metrics in terms of water and financing, and we are looking about how do we actually articulate what those benefits are, both the commercial benefits, but also those non-commercial benefits as well. So we're drawing on what the MDBs are doing, so we're not replicating. And Lauren was talking about not reinventing the wheel each time and asking people to come up with new metrics. So what does it mean to have a successful resilience program and investment? We're open to ideas on all of this, but crucially what we want to see is increased finance coming in and improvements for the most vulnerable people and getting ahead of the curve. So we're not just focused on how do we finance disasters once they've happened, how can we reduce the number, the impact, the prevalence of those disasters happening. That's what real resilience is. That's what it means, I think, to think about adaptation and climate change, not to tidy up the problems afterwards, but to build that in long term ahead. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, I think on measurement, I think it's an interesting point. It is definitely complex, but the approach that C40 has taken is to first of all, develop high impact actions, and this applies to both adaptation and mitigation. Even though carbon seems to be easy, I think the key thing is to understand the impact of actions on these targets. So we've taken a scientific approach in terms of understanding the link between high impact actions like flood reduction measures or water security measures to actual impacts, and through the Water Accelerator, these commitments are measured year on year in terms of the changes to the system. So as I mentioned, the 4 pathways. Again, it's quite difficult to measure because it's quite complex. So to make it slightly easier, well, what we've done 2 things. One is we've taken a more kind of people-focused approach, where we've allowed cities to actually identify the most vulnerable and the most at need first before trying to develop targets for the whole city. And secondly, develop contextualized targets that are time-bound. So achieving universal access for all at-need people in the city by 2030. That's a commitment, and cities are now starting to develop a baseline for them. For that, they will be developing an action plan, and they will be making these commitments and progress on these commitments public as well. So it's not going to be easy. I think it's quite a difficult journey, but we are trying to get on this journey with the cities.
Right. Yeah. So I'd imagine the same question to me. So the metrics. So I think we understand it's complex, and I would suggest and complicated as well. It's really complex. So 5 or 6 years ago, when we were thinking about designing the city water resilience approach, we'd been doing resilience, or thinking we were doing resilience around the world in terms of resilience and adaptation, been working in cities and catchments. But we paused to think and take a step back and develop the evidence base, because it's important to really understand from an evidential point of view that you're doing the right thing. And so we did some work to look at indicators and all that good stuff. We consulted with cities. And what we came across was around about 1,600 factors which either help or hinder resilience. Yeah. So that's really complicated and complex. But what we did do then was to start to look at patterns in that. And we developed that into a resilience tool, a resilience lens. And when I talked about the city water resilience approach earlier, one of our early parts of that process, the 5-step process, is actually to look at the resilience picture of a city and its catchment. It uses those 1,600 factors, brings them in, and together with quantitative and qualitative indicators, bring them all into one place. And that's done in a series of workshops with city officials for the quant pipe, taking in data that we've done desk research, but also consulted with the city and the wider catchment. That then builds a resilience picture called a resilience profile. Every one of those 20 or so cities that we've worked in has a picture. So we have a baseline. It's a baseline then you can monitor performance. Are things strengthening, getting better, or are they weakening and getting worse? So we have that baseline data. We've got to go back, see how things change. Things change slowly, but also rapidly. So seeing how those indicators change. So I would suggest that there are methods around, and we should make use of those rather than reinventing the wheel.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you, panelists today, Kate, Sachin, Martin, and Lauren, for giving up your time and putting so much thought into your reflections and remarks today. I think it was a really insightful panel, and we covered a lot of ground, from planning and national plans to not reinventing the wheel, to finance, partnerships, and governance, and then measures and metrics. To close the session, I'm going to invite Pani, who's one of the COP28 high-level champions team, to provide a summary of the session and also a bridge into some of the next steps from this event.
Everyone, thank you very much, Ara, specifically inviting for us to speak in this very important event. And because this year we have the water agenda, as everybody know, in the COP28 presidency programs. So we are delivering 3 outcomes from the water agenda. And one of the outcomes is directly linked to the conversations that we had today, which is as a relating urban water resilience, because we believe that cities can be the entrance to tackling the climate change and also really need to link into the national climate plannings. And Kate, you specifically mentioned that there is a need to actually link the local actions and local climate actions into the global policy processes. And then this year, we are trying to kind of bridge that gap, or like we're attempting to bridge that gap by really consolidating some of the efforts that is happening in the urban water resilience place. So we have been kind of convening meetings since coming out of the UN Water Conference, and then we have got a number of consultations with our partners, including Arab, RCNs, C40s, and also mayor networks, and to really identify where do we place this urban water activities, a lot of good things that is happening in the space. So we have kind of concluded that we are going to put it into the official UN process, which is under the non-action climate agenda. So we have reached out to the high-level climate champion, and then we will be having the working group on urban water resilience that is linking the local actions and activities to the UNFCCC processes. So that would include some of the points that panelists are mentioning, including how do we build the urban climate resilient utility, climate resilient WASH, and also risk assessment, and also basin scale planning, and also how do we ensure that finance are flowing into this kind of activities that is happening on the ground. So we will be having the first ever urban water resilience group under the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, and then we will be kind of pinpointing some of the targets and some of the key activities coming out of this group, and how do we connect it into like processes like global goal adaptation, because this year we are going to develop the framework under the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC process. So we are trying to kind of link some of the metrics and some of the consideration into those global processes. So having said that, we have a series of activities that we have planned throughout the 2 weeks. So one of the activity is going to be on the 6th, on the multi-level action day, because when we are talking about urban water resilience, there is a link between like how do we link the urban local actors into the national government. So we are having the first ever high-level dialogue on the urban water resilience, which is happening on the 6th of December from 3:30 to 4:30 at the Presidency Roundtable Room. And you are all invited to join us. And then we have a series of dialogue that is happening and bridging between the national government and the local kind of like actors. And then we will also have a launch event that is happening, which is also bringing together all the panelists has mentioned on the 6th as well. We will be launching from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Global Climate Action Lab, which is around the corner. And then we will be talking a little more about like some of the metrics that we are considering, some of the entry point to the Paris Agreement agenda, and how do we kind of link the local actor to the national levels. And then we also believe that financing is very important, so we kind of took into the utility angles, how do we kind of build a climate resilient utility, and then we are really talking about innovative finance on the Water Day, which is happening on the December 10th. So you are all invited. Everything about our event is on the COP presidency agenda, and with that, I am going to congratulate Arab for organizing these sessions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Penny. I think all that's left for me to do is to thank everybody for taking part in the event and close the session and let everybody go and have some lunch. Thank you very much, everyone.
What's next? Oh, on the walkabout, are we? What time's that start?